Next up in line, we have a presentation called Staying Human in a Digital World by Jamie McConville, the Director, Group Solutions Unit, Dentsu Gaming. Can we please put our hands together for Jamie? Please welcome on stage.
Nice to meet you all. I'm Jamie. I work within the Group Solutions Unit of Dentsu Group in Tokyo, in Japan. And so I'm going to be talking to you about something slightly different today. I'm going to be talking about how brands and businesses can stay human in the digital world. If this works, we're just going to use the old school. I'm just going to click through. So I'm Jamie. I work for Dentsu Gaming, and I look after the Asia-Pacific region as part of my remit, and I'm really happy to be here with the rest of the team in India today. Still not working. I love technology. Okay, today we're going to be talking about a few things, and I'm not going to keep you long because I know a monologue isn't that fun. But first, I'll take you through a very quick evolution of virtual identities. Then we can talk about how businesses are actually using virtual identities today. We can talk about how brands and businesses can get started in this space. And then I'll take you through a few key watch-outs that we've learned along the way. So first of all, the evolution of virtual identities. Everyone in this room will have a virtual identity of some type. And we've been quite used to using them as individuals and consumers for decades now. There's something that we use all the time without thinking about it, and there's loads of different use cases in which we use them. However, for businesses, it's been a bit of a slower journey. They started earlier, and there's much fewer use cases that they actually use. So if you look at this slide, the three on the left are actually all entertainment-based, some kind of influencer. And only recently are we seeing businesses kind of trying to take over that virtual identity space and use it for all the power it has. So what can we learn from this? Well, if you're a business, now is the time to really get started. But also you need to remember that the people you're talking to are veterans within this space. They already know how to use virtual identities, and this isn't new to them. So when I think about how I present myself and how I express myself, who I am on this stage versus in my office versus at home are all very different facets of my personality, which is something that's natural to us in the physical world. And in the digital world, that's exactly what happens here as well. So this is our Chief Creative Director, and how he presents himself on all these different platforms is quite naturally different. However, when we start looking at brands, what we see is they're all the same. And actually, they're not just all the same, but they often don't have much personality to them. So there's a huge opportunity here for brands to get more personal in how they're expressing themselves. And what we think is that actually for brands, there's more of an authentic way that they can talk to audiences. So in terms of virtual identity, this is a great chance for brands to personify themselves. And they can be a human brand everywhere they are. That doesn't mean they need to be the same everywhere they are. So let's have a quick look at how some businesses are already using virtual identities today. I do want to make the point here, though, that virtual identities are simply one tool that we can use. And we need to make sure that when we're using them for their strengths. So let me take you through some of the strategies that we've seen being used. The first is that brands that are seen to be in decline can often be seen as having an aging audience. That's simply because their audience, as the audience gets older, they're not replenishing that with new audiences. We see this a lot in the luxury industry. We see this a lot in the financial sector, insurance. And really, because these are a new emerging technology, we do see that the early adopters tend to be disproportionately younger audiences. So this is just one way that you could connect with a younger audience. And we've seen examples of this. So Rosie, who I think her name is slightly cut off, but Rosie is South Korea's first virtual influencer. So actually we saw her collaborating with Shinhan Insurance. Now Shinhan Insurance, their audience is a bit older, and they may not even, the fans of Rosie, yet need home insurance or home loans. But what they can do is already get into the psyche of that audience, already be exposing them to the brand, and make sure when it comes time for those things that they are aware of that brand as well. So another thing that we've noticed about brands is Myself as a consumer, I'm very aware of how a brand is likely to show up to me. So when I'm looking at TV adverts or when I'm even on social media now, the way that brands show up tends to be very predictable. The other thing that we see is that brands are very risk averse. So they're very conscious and conservative about how they go into new spaces. But actually, a brand by definition should be differentiated. They want to be different. They want to be differentiated from the category, from their competitors. And again, virtual identities give us a new way to do that in an unexpected way, showing up to the audience. So this is one of my favorite cases, actually. Wendy's, which is the fast food chain in the US, they actually got involved in the game Fortnite. And they did this spontaneously after Fortnite actually introduced a new game mode called Food Fight. And there was Team Pizza versus Team Burger. I'm not sure how many of you know Wendy's, but Wendy's don't do frozen beef. That is a huge product point. So what Wendy's did is they went inside the game Fortnite. They created a character that looked as close as possible to the Wendy's girl that they've used for years. They then got inside these games and they started destroying Team Burger's freezers, literally going around and axing them. This quickly went viral. Not only was it unexpected that Wendy's would start doing that within the game, but also this was something fun and authentic to the platform that they were on. There was something interesting there, and they weren't trying to force it. They were really playing with the platform they had. Oh, went too far. The next one is around automated experiences. I think we're all pretty familiar now with automated experiences with brands, whether that's customer services and chatbots or other kind of familiar interactions through emails and other such things. Virtual identities give us a real opportunity here to create more unexpected and delightful ways. So something more interesting to have a customer experience with. This is actually an example from Japan. So in Tokyo, a Merry Vintage flagship store, they have put in a screen that customers can relate to in a novel way, which is an AI customer service. So the customer can come in and have a chat about anything with this. This is obviously quite a novel and gimmicky way to do it, but again, it's giving the customer something to enjoy and something to go and talk about to their friends. It's not the standard customer experience. Next is, I was actually very interested to hear the panel chat before because they were talking so much about how important IP is, and I couldn't agree more. What we see with a lot of brands is entertainment is king. So they are spending a lot of money in investments to temporarily collaborate and tie themselves to a popular IP. That's great, but at the end of the day, that is temporary, and virtual identities might give you another way to look at this. So here's an example from Unicharm. This is Mooney-chan. So Mooney-chan is something that we developed in Japan, but Mooney-chan is a character that they have had for about a decade across the markets in Unicharm. And last summer, they made a big announcement. After years of spending money across Disney IPs to collaborate with their products, they were no longer going to do that. Instead, what they're going to do is invest in Mooney-chan as a character to build the character in itself, to build their own equity IP. Eventually, Mooney-chan or other IPs could become revenue generating in themselves. So this is just another way that they can think about how to use these identities. Oh, this is Mooney-chan.
どのカテゴリーも素敵な新商品ばっかり。発売がとっても楽しみだ。
I won't play too much for that because it's very Japanese and very kawaii. But the last one that I wanted to talk about was, we've talked a lot about the metaverse and the different virtual worlds that are being created. Inevitably, a lot of these kind of new worlds get created a lot by the global north. They tend to have characters who are either from East Asia or from the US, the UK, Europe. And what virtual identities allows brands to do, like the Indian market, is to create characters that are really locally relevant. Many of you will have seen this example, but Kyra is actually an Indian virtual identity, an influencer that you could work alongside and collaborate with as a brand, but there's loads of opportunities to do this and to find characters and identities that work for specific brands and audiences. So these are kind of just 5 areas. They're not the only areas. They're just ones that I've pulled out for today. But there's loads of different reasons why virtual identities could be a great tool for brands and businesses to use. And I think the key really here is thinking about the strategy first, the why you would want a virtual identity and why is it existing at all. It needs to have a true purpose and vision behind it. Otherwise, it truly is just a novelty. So now I'm just going to share with you one of the Dentsu virtual identities. Say hello.
Namaskar Mumbai, my name is Rani. I am Dentsu's third child of the metaverse created from our global virtual identity solution. Earlier, the team shared some really interesting insights into the world of virtual identities. I'm sure you are all wondering, how can my brand get started? Well, let's find out.
Thank you, Rani. So, as she said, we're going to look at how brands can get started. So as Rani mentioned, she was our third child of the metaverse. This is Rumi, who was our first child of the metaverse. So when we created Rumi last year, we created Rumi to really embody the passion of Dentsu in terms of looking at what's next. So Rumi is all about championing positivity in all worlds. And she is a character that we use a lot and we work with other brands as well. So they have their own social media presence, they have their own personalities and characteristics which come out. When we created Rani and Rumi, and when we've created other virtual identities for clients, we think about kind of 3 broad steps of the process. The first, as I mentioned before, is probably the most crucial foundation. Why does your virtual identity exist? What is the purpose of your virtual identity? What is it trying to do for your business or brand? Then, once you figure that out, you can think about what is that star power? Why should people care about your virtual identity? And then lastly, we tend to do this as a lightning round, ideating at speed. So thinking about all the different ways that your virtual identity could be expressed in the world. So let me go through them very quickly. The first, so the vision, the why. There are so many different possibilities of how you could use a virtual identity. They are pretty limitless in terms of use cases. I've just pulled out some key ones here, but really, come and have a chat. I think almost every business could find a use for them. But on the left, some of the examples that I shared before. So being a virtual influencer, or it could be a brand ambassador. Maybe your next brand ambassador is virtual, not just your brand ambassadors in the physical world. Next, in the middle, maybe you already have a celebrity ambassador. Maybe you could create an identity twin that could also live in different worlds alongside them. Or maybe an existing character IP that could be built in a new way, like Mooney-chan. And lastly, a bit more practical, but still definitely worthy, there's lots of functional things that we need to do as brands and businesses that could be replaced with virtual identities to give more character, or maybe more entertainment, or even maybe just more of an interaction with your customers. So in the top, it could be education. We look at a lot of things to do with training and development, so could there be a place for them there? And also medical. So medical is a use case where, if someone's really shy, perhaps there's things that they prefer to talk to a virtual identity about rather than a person. And on the bottom right, so this is a use case that we see a lot, which is you could use a virtual identity to actually become the face of your brand in customer service as well. Then looking at star power, I'm sure you recognize lots, if not all, the faces on here. I think we can all agree they have star power. People gravitate to them for a reason, and that's the same thing that you want for your virtual identity. So why should people care? Why should they want to interact with your virtual identity? And you really need to build a personality and characteristics that make them want to follow it. Otherwise, there's no point. And then lastly, thinking about the expression of your virtual identity. And And I wanted to share this slide to really show that a virtual identity could come across in many different ways. It could be anything from the characters on the left, which are much more cute and sweet, all the way up to fully hyper-realistic characters. But when we're talking about virtual identities, they really could be in any of these forms. So I'm just going to show you another 10-second clip of Character Talker, which is more on the left of this.
皆さん、はじめまして。僕の名前はナテシ。キャラトーカーっていうアバターキャラクターなんだ。生き生きとしたいろんな表情が出せるのが僕の特技だよ。
So Nateshi and the other character talker avatars are very different to Rani and Rumi that I showed you earlier, but again could be used by similar brands. So the top example is Toyota. So they were announcing a new product at Tokyo Motor Show, and they actually use character talker. There's no right or wrong when it comes to the forms, and it really depends on the message you're delivering and the audience you're talking to. So there could be many reasons why you'd use them, but I don't think there's any right or wrong, and there's not necessarily a better or worse. And so when we're thinking about the takeaway here, it's really that you're in a world of possibility. There's a great time here to embrace the differences that the virtual world gives you, and the possibilities are pretty endless. So on the last section, I just wanted to talk about some key watch-outs that we've learned as we've been going through this. I'll go through them quite quickly, but I think they're quite important here. So the first one is not forgetting that virtual identities often have real people behind them. This was an example of a black rapper virtual identity. This guy actually went viral across TikTok. He had millions of views overnight, and then was subsequently signed to a major record label. Unfortunately, what they found out was this rapper was rapping about the black struggles and had actually been created by a white creator. So a huge cultural appropriation going on here. And not only that, they then found out that this black rapper's voice was voiced by a black artist who got no money or credit for doing this job. So a huge no-no, and need to be really aware, because brands can be very quickly cancelled for these kind of things. The next one is the idea of being hyper-realistic. And this is kind of the point I made about the forms. Often people think the more realistic is better. Sometimes that isn't the case. If you get too realistic, you can actually fall into something called the uncanny valley, which creeps people out. So they see it, and it's too real, but not quite human, and they can't handle it. So again, why not take advantage of the fact that you're in the virtual world, and you can actually bend that reality a little, and then you don't run the risk. And lastly, there are simply some conversations that a virtual identity can't handle. There's a lot they can, but some they can't. Sometimes when we talk to brands, and I think what you see is that brands think being very realistic is a bit of a novelty. Unfortunately, consumers aren't that gullible, so they don't believe that these are real identities. So when you have a virtual identity that's talking about the delicious, tasty burgers, or in this case, talking about a physical sexual assault that's happened to them, it can often fall flat or much worse. Again, I think it's just about paying attention to what you're doing. And the big takeaway here being that, yes, they're virtual identities, but you still have real impact and real responsibilities as a brand and a business. You can't simply hide behind these virtual identities to do anything you want. So, to summarize, be authentic, be truthful, show your brand in its multifaceted personality wherever you can. Think about the strategy first. Don't fall into gimmicks. Why does your virtual identity exist? Then you can think about the expression and the identity next. Great for you. Embrace all the difference and possibility that is available. And lastly, don't forget the real-world responsibilities and impact that your virtual identities can have. Cool. And that's all I have for you today, but thank you very much. And if you want to talk about virtual identities, please find me later.